Our company actually has very close connections to Detroit. Our lead investor, Fontinalis Partners, from Detroit, actually chaired by Bill Ford of the Ford Motor Company. And obviously there's a tremendous amount of excitement about driverless cars, even though no one's quite sure how that story is going to play out yet. Whatever happens with driverless cars, they will need to live in new kinds of relationships to people and the city. Our technology enables them to have a relative position information with a great deal higher reliability and accuracy than is possible right now with the traditional blobology-based sensor systems. All of these advanced robotic systems are fusions of many types of sensors. I don't think our system will ever be the only sensor on a car, but it does enable, rather than saying, oh, I see a blob there, let's run it through an algorithm to try to figure out what it is, it enables an automobile or a person or a piece of infrastructure to say, oh, I see a point there. Think about it sometimes like the flashing LED on the bike, but with very precise information about exactly where that is, how fast it's going, and what it is. You know, bicycles are very hard to recognize with cameras. You have daylight, you have nighttime, you have snow, rain, sleet, covered up sensors, all that. Our system's immune to all those weather conditions. One of the things that Humanitics is accomplishing as a company is bringing lessons that have been learned in extreme environments from robotics and automation. I think of them as the deep ocean, outer space, aviation, some military environments. These are all places where people have been using robots and autonomy for 40 and 50 years in many cases. A lot of lessons have been learned. I've learned some of them, many others have learned others, about how these things work, what's the best way to get them deployed in the field, what the reliability is, how you build trust. And the two founding scientific advisors of Humanitics are two of my mentors from those realms. One of them is Robert Ballard, who found the Titanic, who I worked with at Woods Hole for many years. And the other is Dave Scott, who is an MIT graduate who worked on the Apollo guidance computer for his graduate thesis and then actually flew it and landed on the moon as the commander of Apollo 15. And they're both you know, sort of big thinkers in how navigation, how exploration can kind of contribute to the world that we live in today. We've hired people from the underwater navigation world. My colleagues, other of my mentors are involved in the company. In some ways, the factory of today from a navigational standpoint looks a lot like the deep ocean does. There's no GPS, there's a lot of noise going on, you have a lot of uncertainty in the environment, you have a small number of fixed beacons you can work from. We're literally using algorithms and techniques from these other realms there. In my 2015 book, Our Robots Ourselves, really addressed this question of what have we learned. And one of the lessons is that for autonomous systems to be useful and have an impact on the human world, almost by definition, and of course the economic world is the human world, they need to situate themselves within human environments. And the idea of a robot being off by itself in the desert is, even when we put them on Mars, they're still very tightly related to human environment, human controls, human assumptions that go into the design of the robots. And the more we understand and see those human inputs, the more effective we can be. The story is full of robots that were designed to be fully autonomous, like the Predator, the famous drone that was used in Iraq and Afghanistan, was designed to be fully autonomous with no operator input at all. When it actually got deployed into the field, it had a big impact on the world, but it ended up taking 150, 175 people to operate it. There's nothing unmanned about it. It's a remote manned system. And many other systems bring new levels of decision making. It's not that there's nothing exciting going on in the world of AI and autonomy, but when we actually yoke those systems to provide human value in various settings, we need to think about how they're embedded in these human contexts. You see that story play out over and over again. You can do it after the fact when it tends to be expensive and very cumbersome, or I'm arguing that we need to think about building those relationships into the core autonomy of these systems as we deploy them into the field. And I think those ideas are getting out there. You know, some driverless car companies will say, our car is purely autonomous, operates with no input from anybody, which isn't really true anyway. There's tons of input in a driverless car. There are thousands of assumptions that the programmers put in about what constitutes a pedestrian and how fast this is moving and whatnot. But I think the more sophisticated auto companies are now saying, the car is your collaborator, the car is your friend, the car learns from your driving habits, the car works with the environment around you, the car draws on what's happening in the cloud. We don't have all the answers to how those technologies are going to work, but I think that's a more compelling story in a lot of ways. Doesn't mean the automation doesn't still help people in all kinds of ways and open up new vistas for how we use mobility, but it's a different way to think about it. If you look at aviation, that's how autopilots, Autoland, all kinds of systems are used.